All right, this is another RCA story. Uh, I just found it, and I also just found the brightness control for my for the camera. Uh, I've gone through so many different programs to run the camera. See, what happened was I was using Windows uh, capture, and they updated it. It didn't work right with my camera. And then I went back to the original. Uh, what's the name of the Logitech unit software, and then Windows updated and it wouldn't let the Logitech software work right. And then I went back to the Windows and then when Windows updated and it wouldn't work with the camera again. Now I'm back with the Logitech. And in between, Logitech changed the program. So anyway, the brightness is somewhere else. So anyway, I feel bad sort of that when I did some of the videos, they could have been a little brighter. But it's basically, I always tell you, it's basically what I'm saying. And then if you're working on the same thing I'm talking about, you have it in your hand, you can look at it. But I want to tell you this one story. When I was in RCA, basically, I started there like dead of winter, and it wasn't much to do. So I got in. I started doing different hobbies, and at some point, I went in a store and I bought a tumbler's tumbler, and it comes with a bag of rocks, and you tumble and you learn how to change the grit and the whole thing. And I told you once before, my dad's sister went digging for Apache tears, and that's all that was on that site. So they got there and they spent the whole day, and they came back with all these Apache tears. And it looks like a piece of smoky glass. And so my father got some from her, and I broke them as best I could into a ball shape. And then I tumbled them, and they come out really nice. And then he sent some to her, sent some back to her. She sent some more. We tumbled some more, and then my father was putting them in earrings and taking them to work. It got quite involved for a while. But to keep the tumbler going, it would go through O-rings. It had an O-ring drive from the drum to the motor, and I think yeah, there was the drum. The motor had a pulley on it, went up to this big pulley, and then that shaft went underneath the drum itself. So it was pretty well set. So the drum would only go around like once per second, and the whole operation to tumble stuff was about a month. And every day or every week you would change the grip. So at one point, uh, I would send away for belts, and they had these bushings. They weren't Teflon, and they weren't Delrin. They were some type of crappy plastic, and those would wear out. So one day I got up in the morning, and the O-ring was broke. I put it in my pocket. I went into work, and I showed it to Joe. I said, "Yeah, this is." This is the drive belt. It's just an O-ring for my tumbler's tumbler." I said, "I can order more, but I would like to finish this batch of Apache tears up." So Joe's sitting there. He's smoking his pipe. He's holding the broken um, O-ring, and he's making believe he can put it back together. And he goes, so break time was coming. He goes, "Come with me." And then he goes, as we're climbing the stairs to go up to this level of RCA, he says, "We're not supposed to be here. You really have to have a government clearance." And I'm like, I'm just going with him. I don't know anything about these levels of RCA. I'm a new guy there. So he goes up to this window. The windows you slide open like in a dentist's office. And he knocks on it. Guy opens up. "Hey, Joe. Hey." He goes, "The kid here needs an O-ring." So he shows him the O-ring. Guy goes, "Okay, I can make it up for you." So we leave and come back later in the day, and there's the O-ring. So this other guy made a comment, and he says, "Oh, we took him upstairs to, and the other guys are afraid to go up there because if you get caught, you could probably get fired." And the one guy says to me, "You know what they make up there?" And I go, "No, no." He goes, "They make fuel cells there." And I went, "Okay." And they go, "You know what? Yeah, I know what a fuel cell is." And the guy didn't believe me. I said, Yeah, it's a box, and there's a valve on it. And when you put like hydrogen through it or other fuels, it's like a battery. It turns on and it produces electricity. And they use them in satellites. They can shut the satellite down for a while. Then they tell the satellite to turn back on, and then the fuel flows through the plates in this battery-like thing. And then you got your electricity again. And then after the satellite does what you want it to do, it shuts back down. Now, those fuel cells were probably on the Voyager. Now, RCA also had a microprocessor on they made a microprocessor. They were in the computers for a while, but they're known for this microprocessor. It's CMOS inside. All the technology in it is CMOS, so it's slower than a fast microprocessor, but it almost draws no current at all. That's why they put it on the Voyager, and the Voyager probably also has the fuel cells. So Joe takes me with him back to the fuel cell place, and I think they didn't have anything out in the front, so the guy invited me in, and while I'm in there, you could tell they went. The fuel cells are now in another room. You have to go through a checkpoint to get in there. So out in front is these two guys with a kid's record player, and they're playing the same record over and over and over, and they're looking under the microscope, and they're checking it for wear, and they're spraying stuff on the record. And I had some stories uh, about that, stories that I started telling them. They're just staring at me. I said, yeah. I said, Radio Shack came out with a spray, and people were spraying it on their records, and it was a cleaning spray, but it was actually eating the records. Funny story. The manager had to quietly pull all these cans of spray off the shelf, and play stupid when the customers came in and said that the spray ruined their records. There's two weird stories there. So I'm talking to my guys. I said, "Do you guys know what a dust bug is?" And they're looking at me. I said, "It's an arm. You put it on your record player, not record player, a turntable. And when you start the record, you lay this thing down, and the dust bug had like a brush, and it would ride on the record, and it would dislodge any dust and catch it in the brush. Now, Audio Technica, that's what the one I had. It had like a velvet roller that didn't turn. You could rotate it to a new spot, but you'd put that on, and by the time it got to the end of the record, it was impacted with dust. And those little fingers from the felt, if it was felt, and the roller was on a piece of styrofoam. The soft kind of styrofoam that's modern today. And I bought extra rollers for the Audio Technica. Every time I played a record, I put that Audio Technica arm on there, and you couldn't believe the crap it would pull out of the record. Now, some of it was as the Audio Technica went over the record, it would statically charge the record, and then the record would pull the dust out of the air. So when it was done, you would basically see dust that you created. You pulled it onto the record. So the whole thing, I won't say it was a scam, but here I'm explaining to these guys, and they're trying to figure out which lubricant spray protects the record. They're gonna make a product for RCA, and they got the other guys, but they never heard of the two arms, the dust bug, yeah, I think it was dust bug, and the Audio Technica. And I was into records at the time. I bought a V15 4 cartridge at some point, and they would write you this letter and say, it's time for you to send your stylus back. And I would check the stylus with my microscope, and it was fine. I didn't realize the stylus was mounted in a piece of rubber, and they would change that piece of rubber. And if I finally caught on to what was going on. As the rubber gets hard, within say a year, the highs from like a clarinet or a trumpet, no, a clarinet or a flute, no, a clarinet. There's certain instruments where the high end starts to disappear because the stylus can't vibrate at that higher frequency. And I had a pretty good stereo, and it hit me one day. I'm like, you know what? That's why they wanted the stylus back. They remount it. The little rubber piece gets changed. But sometimes, I know how to check a stylus under a microscope. Yeah, I knew that, and I wasn't plain enough to wear it out. But what was happening is one day I noticed I wasn't getting any highs, and then as I played it for a while, they would come back. I'm like, what is going on? And then one day I'm sitting there going, oh, there's a piece of rubber in there. Now, if the cellar was cold, it would show up. If I played the record for a while, the highs would come back because the rubber would be vibrating and it'd become more flexible again. So there's stuff you think you know that you don't know. It's like if you watch the video about what the hell is it? The stupid channel master radio, the tuning capacitor. I found out it was really worn. I didn't see it. I didn't see that spot, and it's worn. And the other thing too is I believe the slip rings are set using a gram gauge, and it's got that look. And I'm like, you know what? I'm in over my head. My goal on that tuning capacitor was to find why it failed, and if I could open it up, if I could find what failed, if I could repair it. So I put a lot of time in on that, and that was a big what they call I always call them a rabbit hole. And sometimes that's what happens. To take your skill to the next level, you sometimes have to take something apart. But you got to see these guys. They had a children's record player, and they had opera record, a opera record, and they would play it so many times in a row. And they were driving the guy crazy that did the that's why I'm telling you the story. They were driving the guy crazy that did the fuel cells. But yeah, I give him an O-ring, and he could pour the rubber out and then bake it in an oven and give you back an O-ring. But I only used them once. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. And while I was using the O-ring that he made for me, I mailed away to Tumbler's Tumbler. I don't remember the name of the company, but the Tumbler's Tumbler, what made it really good was inside the drum, it's got walls in there on angles. So it forces the stone to tumble. And it's considered a beginner's tumbler. Now, I very later on built my own tumbler, and I bought the drums in the mall. Tumbling became a pretty big hobby there for a while. There was actually a tumbler place, and he would sell you the grits. It was hilarious. And the best I ever tumbled was the Apache Tears, and I found a magazine article, coincidentally at the same time, and it was a Tumbler magazine. And this is when they sold all kinds of magazines in a magazine shop in the mall. And the guy says, for the last tumble, you put soapy water and styrofoam in the tumbler. The media that you tumble with is styrofoam and soapy water. They told you what kind of soap it was and how much to put in there, like a tablespoon or whatever. And I tumbled those Apache Tears, and they come out beautiful. And then my dad was like, tumble this one, tumble. I said, you don't understand. The tumbler only kind of polishes a stone. It's not going to take a giant stone and make it smaller. And he's like, well, I said, you got to cut these smaller, and you have to get them smaller before you tumble them. And he couldn't get the concept. He thought I was putting big ones in. I said, no, I was picking out the smaller ones. And then you can't hit them with a hammer; they shatter. And I think I did one with I had a larger one, and I cut it in half using some. I used a tire in the vise to hold the stone, and I was able to cut it in half with a hacksaw. And it took a long time to cut through it. And yeah, you cut through it all the way around a little bit, and then you put a chisel there and you hit it, and it cracks there. And then you put those two pieces in the tumbler, and after a month, you got two nice size Apache Tears, which you could make a pendant out of it or earrings, depending how they get really heavy because it's like a piece of glass. But it was a conversation piece. And my father was, "Can you do another set?" So that tumbler just kept going. And then I'd lay in bed and I could hear it running in the living room. And I'd hear it stop. It would every once in a while it would just you couldn't find out why, but it would just the tumbler would come up off the rollers. And sometimes it would sit a certain way, and the bottom of the drum would run on another part and mess it up. It was a fun thing. See, on the bottom was these rubber. Uh, they weren't wheels. They were sort of wheels, but they went on the shafts. There were two shafts on the bottom that the drum ran on, and you had to have the drum balanced so it would stay on these rubber rollers. And there was two on the outside of the drum to keep it from, and there was two on the inside. The drum had an inner edge to it. Well, anyway, if you go look at a tumbler's tumbler, and then you had these bushings that were plastic, and the bushings would wear out. If the drum the rocks would fall in the drum a certain way, and it would cause the drum to go off center and pop off the rollers. And the best I figured it out was after it tumbles so many days, somehow the liquid gets out of the drum, and then the mixture of the grit and water gets thick, and then that can cling to the inside of the drum, and it gets it the right way, the right momentum, and then the drum walks itself off the rollers. So every few days you had to open it up, and there was an O-ring on to hold to close up the drum, and it had a cardboard. It looked like a piece of cardboard. You put it in like a lid, like on an ice cream thing on the inside, and then you put the O-ring around it. You can find Tumblr's Tumbler up on the internet, and I think they still sell them on eBay. But I just want to tell you, yeah, I'm inside where they make the fuel cells, and then when I go back, one of the guy goes, "You know what a fuel cell is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I read it. I read the article. You know, Popular Science had that stuff in there, and they show a little diagram and the plates, whatever they used in it, and the whole thing is when you shut it off, it uses a gas. So basically, it's a battery that you could turn on and off, and the battery won't leak. In other words, as long as they use a gas that goes through it. So in other words, Voyager can be way out there now, which it is, and they can turn it back on, and they know how much fuel is on it, and how when they can turn it on, how long they can leave it on for, and yeah, because you think, well, don't the batteries go bad? Don't they leak? No, they use fuel cells. Just want to tell you, go look up fuel cells. Back then when I was in that room, that was top secret stuff. And the one guy goes, "You're not supposed to be up there." And I'm like, "I don't know." Joe said, "Come with me." I went with him. And then when we're there at the door, we're not supposed to be up here. I was like, "Okay, thanks, Joe. I want to get fired from a big company, you know." But yeah, it was fun. But Joe knew everybody in the place. He was there for 25 years, and he'd barter with them. What he would do is, okay, here's how it worked. Joe always had a van, and a couple of people would tease him and call it a truck. Joe Truck Touron, that's what they called him. And he would keep track of who kept calling that van a truck. And then one day they decided to go to the company store and get a television set. And then they go up to Joe. "Joe, could you drive this home?" And he goes, "What? I bought a TV set." What? And then they had to write an apology letter about his truck for calling it his van for calling it a truck. He was hilarious. And I said, "You actually did?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I get tired of them calling." He called it a multi-use type vehicle. And then one guy, Padner, the guy with the buggy eyes and he was always drunk. He got in the van one time. He opened the door, and down on the floor panel, it said truck. And they got in a bad fight over that, you know. But Joe didn't want it to be called a truck. It was, I think, the inspection, the title, the registration. It wasn't registered as a truck. It was a utility vehicle or something like that. So I was around some characters, and a lot of them were fun characters. And I always tell you, Patner was just bad news. But Patner would start up again. In other words, once Joe delivered the television set to his house, the next day he started calling the van a truck again. Yeah, me and Joe went over, got his truck out, and we went down to the company store and got a TV set and drove it to my house. And you could see Joe was not very happy over it. He just, that was his thing. Don't call his van a truck. But yeah, he knew every part in that place. I told you, he used to he used to go down to the machine shop every day and get a piece of angle iron, and then he'd come up in our section. He'd drill a hole in the end, and he had a hanger, and he would hang it down through his out through his leg, and he would walk out like he had a bum leg. And then one day they had a sign, all the angle iron you want. So he comes up to me. He asked the other guys, "Can you come after work? Can you come with me? I'm going to move my van in there and I'm going to load it up with some angle iron." Because Joe had a welder. And no, we're not going to do that. And these are the people who used to drive stuff home for them. So he comes up to me and he goes, "I know you're new." I go, "What's the matter?" He says, "I need someone to help me with the angle iron." "What angle iron?" He goes, "They put a sign up." And I knew he was into angle iron. And I said, "Why? I'll help you. Why wouldn't I help you?" So we go down. He brings the van up, and you have to get signed. You have to have a note from your boss, and they go through all that and backs the van into the courtyard. And then we start loading it up with the angle iron, and the guard comes out and he makes sure that the sign is real. All the angle iron, you take it. They needed to get rid of it. And then finally he gets the van pretty well full. And you get dirty. I was dirty, and then he had a rag there and wiped my hands, and he thanked me. And then the next morning he's like, "I really," I said, "Joe, that was nothing. That was nothing." But the people in RCA, when it was time to go home, it was time to go home. I won't go into other stories, but when it was time to go home, it was time to go home. And he didn't think he didn't think he was be able to load the van by himself with that much iron. And he took a lot of angle iron. And then I went and visited him after I got laid off. I went down to his house, and he took a Volkswagen stick shift, and he made his own tiller, and he had a face drawn on it. He had all the little things welded to it. There were other things he built, but what he worked with his welder and for other people was angle iron. That was his material of choice. I think that's it. All right, that's it.